So particularly when it comes to healing, I think that it's really important to know what you want. And it doesn't have to be super specific, and it's liable to change and shift. But so often our attention is on what we don't want, right? And that is valid. That's kind of the starting point, right? We are noticing the issues and the patterns, pain and the challenges, and we want freedom from that. So we can start there. But then we need to ask ourselves, okay, but what's on the other side of that? And I think that this needs to be a personal inquiry, right? Because so often people on the spiritual path have adopted this idea of wanting, for example, spiritual awakening. And then I ask them, okay, well, what is that for you? What does that mean? And oftentimes they'll share with me words that don't feel like their own, words that they've heard from a spiritual teacher or read in a spiritual text about awakening, and it's quite conceptual. And then when we inquire further, what they're really wanting is freedom. But what is freedom? Well, it's freedom from something, usually, right? Some aspect of their experience that they're struggling with. So now we're getting closer, right? And then, okay, but what's on the other side of that for you? And that's when things start to get really real. You know, that's when actual shifts, when actual progress can really start to happen. Because when we're always focusing on what we don't want, well, we keep focusing on that and we don't notice those moments when we get what we want. And I'm not talking about the things that we want. I'm not talking about the things and the experiences that we want. That's valid, but that's not what I'm focused on right now. I'm focused on the quality of being that we're wanting for ourselves, essentially. And we're all individuals in that sense. We're all going to bloom in different ways. And so just to give you an example, when I snapped out of my fixation on spiritual awakening, which was really just an attempt to get away from suffering and also a wanting to feel special because of how worthless I felt. What I really got in touch with was actually all I'm wanting, what I really want for myself, is to feel comfortable in my own skin. I just want to feel comfortable in my own skin. I just want to enjoy my life. I want to feel comfortable so that I can be myself, so I can be authentic. It's not lofty, right? It's kind of like humble, and it paradoxically, my experience has been getting in touch with that has brought me closer to God, closer to the divine, closer to myself with a capital S, right? So I feel this is a really important question of what do I want for myself? And of course, what this really is tapping into your heart's longing. What your soul, your individualized aspect and expression of consciousness is wanting to experience and embody in this lifetime. And again, it's not a goal, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be super set in stone, right? You'll notice a pattern emerging as you inquire into this, but maybe different words will come. And what this does is that it allows you to really notice when that's happening, right? Which is so important. So important. Part of the trauma tangle, what I call the trauma tangle, is this kind of negative self-talk and this self-shaming where we set really high standards for ourselves and we can never live up to them. Even if we do, we can't, right? That inner voice won't accept that you have lived up to it. The ideal will always be shifting. It will never be met from that perspective. And we fail to notice these precious moments when there is an opening, when there's a moment of relaxation, when there's a moment of connection, a moment of peace. And in the same way that we would be with our own child, always like reflecting, back their achievements, right? Their progress, kind of to encourage and inspire. We need to be like that with ourselves. We need to really allow ourselves to acknowledge those openings and those shifts. And to become acutely aware of that voice that's telling us otherwise. The voice of doubt. The voice of judgment. It's insidious. Sometimes we only feel the impact of the voice. We didn't hear ourselves thinking those thoughts. We just suddenly felt deflated or suddenly felt ashamed or suddenly felt not good enough. But if when you start to track it, when you really start to turn the lights on inside, you can track it was something you were telling yourself. And this voice, while its intention is sincere, because it's a movement of protection, so it deserves our attention and our respect, it is never true. Never, ever, 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 ever true. It's always and only ever a voice, a habit, a pattern. And so it also feels important to make a distinction between the wanting and not wanting polarity, also known as clinging and aversion, that comes from the ego or the constructed self, the false sense of self, with this longing, with this heartfelt desire. Because this heartfelt desire, apart from the fact that it's coming from your heart, right, has the potential to lead you home, right? It's not coming from fear, it's not coming from resistance, it's not a rejection of what is. It's the natural longing that is always calling us more deeply into ourselves, which is different. And see if you can really notice and feel this difference from that kind of wanting to change your experience, which is coming from a not wanting, essentially, right? It's coming from a rejection of what is. And I make that distinction because sometimes people can get confused about that, and they kind of can dismiss that the longing that's really driving this whole machine. That longing, that desire is what makes life possible. It's what brings us here. It's what keeps us moving forward. And that longing has the potential to drop us into what's always and already here.